I was at an intersection with my desire and my enthusiasm and my plans crossing with other people that thought I was crazy. But I had a failure is not an option mindset about what I was doing, and I really believed I could make something like this work.
That was Bob Oswaks discussing his transition from president of worldwide marketing at Sony Pictures Television to master artisan baker and proprietor at Bob's Well-Bred Bakery and Café in Los Alamos, California. From Sony to sourdough. That doesn't happen very often. Bob gives a great interview. He describes what life is like when you're feeding people's souls. I think you're going to dig it. Just keep on listening. 2, 3, 4. Hey there, podcast people. John here. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 15 of Make Moves. This episode features an interview with Bob Oswaks, the master artisan baker. When I say master baker, I mean world class. When Prince William and Kate come to California to play polo and they throw a huge banquet for 800 of their best friends and they need 800 loaves of the best bread that money can buy, Bob gets the call. Becoming a master artisan baker in and of itself is quite an accomplishment, but I think it's worth pointing out that Bob went through an enormous career transition as a senior executive in Hollywood to become a master artisan baker. This is not a normal pathway in someone's career that I'm aware of, so to me it seems like something worth investigating. Before we jump into the interview, I would like to ask a few things of you listeners out there. If you have not already, please do subscribe to this show so you can get them all as they come out. If you enjoy the show, I hope you will take a couple of seconds to rate it and review it in the podcast app or in the iTunes store. And I hope you will share this with a couple of friends. If you enjoy it, spread the word. I'd love to build the audience organically, and it takes help from people like you. All right, folks, I'm going to check in with you about the halfway point. I've got some great music for you to play in this episode. And of course, I'll check in with you at the end for some parting thoughts. Until then, I'm going to turn off my mic. You turn on your ears. Happy listening. Hey, Bob, thanks for coming on Make Moves.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could make some time. I thought I would tell listeners briefly how you came onto my radar. You run Bob's Well-Bred Bakery and Café.
Yes.
That's in Los Alamos, California.
Right.
And is that part of wine country, or it's sort of a weird destination because people like you are there?
It definitely is sort of the heart of wine country. San Ynez Valley consists of Solvang, Buellton, Ballard, Los Alamos, and Los Olivos, and San Ynez. So it's those 6 towns that make up the San Ynez Valley, which is the Central Coast wine country.
Well, I was out there once with my wife, who was actually in the bread industry. And while we're out there, she wanted to come into your bakery and see what was going on. And in any case, she wanted to come in and sort of dork out about bread. And I don't know that much about bread, but she said, we have to go in here and see it. And I was sort of like the little kid who didn't know his mom was dragging him around. I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
So you came out, you were very kind. You brought some beautiful bread. By the way, listeners, I'm looking at beautiful bread here. You brought some beautiful bread out. I think maybe one was an olive loaf. I'm not sure, but and you guys were breaking bread apart and, looking at the way crust flakes and the density of
the crust and the crumb.
Yeah. And so I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I got a small, I think it was a sourdough pretzel. It was sort of low in the display case. It wasn't the fanciest thing, but I was just sort of like a little kid who needed a lollipop.
Right.
So I got a sourdough pretzel, and I started eating the pretzel. And up until that moment, I never needed a hierarchy for the best pretzel in the world. But suddenly there needed to be a hierarchy for the best pretzel in the world. And this was the best pretzel I had ever had in my life. I don't know. And I immediately thought, what is going on in this place? How could a pretzel be like this? And so when we got home to town, of course, I looked you up and I realized, wait, there is a real story here, and there's something deeper. So when I reached out to you to see if you would talk, I really appreciate you taking the chance, because I know there's some goodness in here that we're gonna get to. Maybe you could do me a favor. Tell listeners out there sort of what is the elevator pitch of Bob's Well-Bred Bakery and Cafe. What is it that you think really distinguishes you and makes you the unique thing that you are?
Well, our strap line for Bob's Well-Bred is artisan bread, handmade in small batches, which was the way I always wanted to be about what we produce. So everything we'd made, is touched by human hands, mixed, shaped, and baked that way. So there's not there's a lot of bakeries that have such levels of automation that they have a bun roller and a baguette molder and different things that you can use machines to do. But I think once you stop taking your hands and putting them into the product, that's when it starts to suffer. And really what I set out to do in creating this bakery concept was to, and thank you for your kind words about the pretzel, but I wanted everything that we made to be the absolute, in my opinion, best representation of that particular piece. Whether it's our croissant or pain au chocolat, our sourdough bread, our bagels, our pretzels, our English muffins, whatever it is, I wanted to be regarded that way. And as such, in developing the menu and the product line that we do, it didn't all come from one book. I mean, if you see, some of the books I have at home behind you, I've taken inspiration from, everyone from Nancy Silverton to the Model Bakery to Ken Forkish up in Portland to Dominique Ansel, Chad Robertson, who was really my hero from Tartine up in San Francisco, because once I read Tartine Bread, I knew that was going to be the rest of my life, to be a baker and have a bakery like that. But so all of everything that we produce has really been inspired by someone else's version of it that we've made our own.
So, I mean, if you want to look at the notes I wrote here, I wrote everything in there is the best example of what it can be. I mean, that's just based on experience, and I'm not an expert, yeah. You are, but...
And that's what ends up happening. I mean, it's humbling, certainly, but, either people tell me this or I read it in our guest book when they sign it, but people say, this is the best croissant I've had in the United States. This is the best pain au chocolat. Your bread is the best bread in America. It's all those wonderful, humbling and nice to hear accolades, and it's great to hear it, but it really reinforces that we're doing something right. We're making people happy. We're feeding people's souls more than anything else.
And this is how I started to know there's got to be something about this guy, Bob. It's probably not the easiest or maybe most, there's probably more efficient, cheaper ways to make bread, but why does it have to be the best for you? I mean, people aren't driven to make the perfect pretzel for no reason.
I think it's probably a function of how I always lived my life or built the previous career I had, which was in the entertainment business and television. But I was never one of those people for whom good enough was good enough. So yeah, I could make bread with General Mills flour for $15 a 50-pound bag and use tap water and Morton's salt. But the fact is, the organic flour that we get from Petaluma up in Northern California, French sea salt and filtered spring water makes a much better bread. You could tell the difference in the mix of the dough, in the flavor of the bread. I mean, everything, bread is 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. But it's through this process of fermentation and the hours that the dough ferments and gets shaped and the hydration that it has. But through this process of fermentation, it becomes something wildly different and much more complex than the 3 ingredients you started with. And so anybody can mix together flour, water, and salt and eventually have something that could be considered bread. But if you're going to make the best bread, you got to use the best ingredients. And it's all about that, whether it's, the European, extremely high fat content butter that we use in our pastries that makes them flaky the way they are, or it's the, French dark chocolate, bittersweet chocolate that we use in the pain au chocolat, or whatever it is, that's the way we do it, because it's got to be the best.
So as I was trying to figure out how to prepare for this, I realized that there's no way to sort of tease apart the story of you from the story of this bakery, and I guess how those two things are. You even hinted at it. You had a sort of a previous career and a way of operating before this. Okay, listeners, this is where the unlikely part happens. You had sort of an unlikely pathway to becoming I don't know if unlikely is the word. It seems unlikely on the outside, but you're probably the ultimate judge. You had this entertainment industry career, and what was that, and how long did you do that?
Well, I spent my earliest years growing up on Long Island with my parents in a very middle-class environment, and was always fascinated by the entertainment business, television and movies specifically, and always going to the movies on the weekend afternoons, always watching, the $1 million movie, which was the syndicated repeats in the afternoon, always, waiting for my mother to come home from the grocery store with a brand new TV guide so I could tear it apart, and read everything and figure out what was going on and what show and what some of the backstories in the editorial was and everything. And so when I graduated college, I packed up my little Triumph Spitfire and drove from, Long Island to Los Angeles, determined to, make my career in the entertainment business. And it was through, my first job was with NBC, and I was training to be a unit manager, which is a really dry financial liaison between a production and the network. At NBC this was. So I was doing financial calculations, excuse me, for shows like Hollywood Squares and The Tonight Show and Days of Our Lives. But other than being on the network lot in Burbank, that was really as close as I was to entertainment, because what I was doing was dry and not very interesting. But I networked around a lot and met some people that worked for Norman Lear, and I ended up interviewing to be their head of marketing, which, I was all of 22 years old in 1980. So I was an unlikely, marketing executive. Other than that, I'd studied marketing in school. And but they were looking for somebody green and to grow with the job, and I ended up, creating campaigns for some of the most classic television, classic and iconic series that have been around, for everything from Maude, Sanford and Son, Good Times, The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, Different Strokes, Facts of Life, shows that you probably grew up with. And and I stayed with Norman Lear until he sold the company to Coca-Cola Company, which owned Columbia Pictures. But through a series of career moves and looking for, the best way to build my particular career, I went from working for Norman when he sold the company to Paramount, to Orion Pictures, to Fremantle, which produced American Idol. And I was, mostly spending most of my time in Los Angeles, but did live in London for about 5 years and traveled all over the world marketing TV shows for Fremantle and Pearson. But got recruited by Sony to come back to what was then Columbia Pictures Television, this company that I'd left 15 years before. And I came back as a EVP of their U.S. marketing for all their TV shows, launching shows like Seinfeld and King of Queens and The Ricky Lake Show and stuff like that, and worked my way up there over the next 11 years. And when I left in 2011, I was president of worldwide marketing for them, overseeing domestic and international marketing and home entertainment and digital and all those things. And I left, at the top of my career, but it wasn't exactly my choice. But those jobs are very tough and tough to hold on to. And but I look at it as a gift now to have left a big job early enough in my career to figure out what I wanted to do next. And actually, one of the first calls I got was from Norman Lear, who I was still working with because, ironically, because Sony owned his library of television series, I was now working with him to do these major DVD sets of all of his series and do major compilations and do a lot of behind the scenes work with him. And he called, right after I got laid off by Sony and said to me, well, how long you've been in this business? And I said 30 years, 32 years maybe. He said, and how long were you at Sony? And I said, 11 years. And he said, over and next, you had a great run, but life isn't about doing the same thing forever. So find something. What else are you passionate about? You should look at and see what you're passionate in, where that lies. And I appreciated the consolation and the words of advice, but I had no idea that I would be taking it so literally at the time. And my wife and I had a wood-fired oven in our backyard in our house in Hancock Park in LA. And, I was sort of this weekend pizzaiolo, making pizza, making dough, just playing around with it. But, because we were food and wine enthusiasts, that's what I did. But I had a lot of time on my hands, shall we say. And I started reading books and making bread while I was waiting for headhunters to call back, thinking I was going to go right back to work at a studio or a network or a cable company, not thinking I was really going to take a path less traveled. And so I started making bread in my backyard, thinking I need to keep my hands and my mind busy, and I got a couple books on bread, and nothing quite resonated. And then I was given a copy of Tartine Bread by Chad Robertson from Tartine Bakery, the highly renowned bakery and cafe in San Francisco. And that changed everything. His way that he wrote the book and his approach to bread really helped inform what my opinions and what my understanding was going to be in a very unique way. It just resonated with me. And the very first bread I made from this book was as good as anything that we make today at the bakery. And so I gave it to somebody who said, my God, this is the best bread I've ever had. So I said to myself, I wasn't really, thinking about a career change yet, but I thought, well, I've got time. Let me make bread every day. Let me feed that starter twice a day so that it's never too sour, never too much acid in it. But let me make bread every day, so whether I'm doing it early or late, or if it's hot or cold or humid or dry, the challenge is, how do I make something that's going to be the same? How do you make something consistently? Which was teaching me a lot about the chemistry of bread, because fermentation is all about chemistry, which if people say, what would you have done differently in your life? I would have been a better student, because running a bakery and making bread is about math, understanding the algebraic equations to increase or decrease your formula daily. And it's about science, understanding fermentation and how that works. So I kept doing that. And along the way, I had the opportunity very early on to work with Giada De Laurentiis, who was the celebrity caterer for when Prince William and Kate were coming to play polo, when William was playing polo in Santa Barbara. She was the celebrity caterer for the luncheon. A friend of mine was the special events coordinator, and Giada said, well, I'm not really into La Brea Bakery these days. And my friend said, well, my friend makes bread. And, so she called me and, said, Giada wants to try your bread, so can you bring one of everything you make down to her studio in Culver City? And I said, yikes, okay. So I did this, and she comes out of her dressing room, and they're all laid out on cutting boards and with knives, and I cut them in half so she could look at the crust and the crumb and see how the fermentation and feel how the breads had a great deal of moisture to them so that they would hold up. And she said, this is really nice. Can you do this for 800 people? I said, yeah, of course. Never let them see you sweat kind of thing. And so I came home and said to my wife, how are we going to do this? And, she found a commercial kitchen to rent in Pasadena, and I set out to figure out how to scale up my starter and scale out my flour and all my ingredients to make enough bread for 800 people. Got some help along the way from some family members and did it and went to the event, and she put me on the program, and I started getting calls from caterers and people like, oh, I want the bread you made for Prince William. And it's like, okay. And then I thought to myself, well, maybe that's when the light finally went off and said, well, maybe there's something to this. Maybe the universe is pointing me in the direction it wants me to go in, because all this time I was looking for a job, I was doing consulting work in entertainment, and I was starting to work on a business plan. And so the more I started working on this business plan, the less I started looking for a job. So these parallel lines started to get thinner on one side and much thicker on the other. But I hired someone to help me write a business plan. We spent 2 years working on it. We'd meet for 3 hours a day, once a week. He'd give me these homework assignments, and it was really complicated, we figured out early on that I wanted to do a bakery, and I wanted it to be in the San Ynez Valley because there's a real lack of artisan bakeries between Santa Barbara and San Francisco. There's a couple of us, but not many. And we'd already had a house in Los Alamos. It was a weekend place we'd bought years before. And I liked the idea of getting out of the city and doing something artisanal in an area that already is known for artisans. Craft beer, wine, cheese, farmers. When you go to a business like that and when you come to us, for instance, and you see my bakers rolling croissants and loading bread in and out of the oven and steaming the oven, and you just see all the things we do because it's an open kitchen. There's a little magic to that. When you're making something with your hands, there's magic. And it doesn't matter if it's bread or cheese or wine or beer or whatever. People want that experience. And that's what they take home with them. It may not change the way the bread tastes, but they all get that experience to take home with them. So we began working on this business plan that included a bakery being in Santa Ynez Valley. And the homework assignments were, how many people live in all the different communities between Paso Robles and Santa Barbara? So, whether it's Goleta or Hollister or Buellton or San Ynez or Lompoc or Santa Maria or Nipomo or Slough, that was a lot of research at libraries to come up with how many people live there and how much do these people spend on food, how much do they spend on bread, how much do they spend on food inside the home, and how much do they spend when they go out, and what is the average income of these communities, and what is the average age, and what is the housing cost. Understanding these communities helped inform who I was targeting. Then, what are people buying in bread? Where are they buying bread now? They're buying it at Costco and Trader Joe's and Albertsons because there isn't a bakery that makes something the way they remembered from when they were little, and there was a bakery in their town. So if we could understand what they were buying and why they were buying it, where they were buying it, we could hopefully come up with a plan for something that would reach them and give them what they want the way they want it. And we did this for 2 years, and at the end of almost 2 years, I said, well, where's the business plan? I want to take something to a bank. And what these, 104 homework assignments were over the course of 2 years, they were the template for putting it together, these pieces of a puzzle for a business plan that I could take to the bank, which is what I did. We convinced my wife to move up here, and we committed to moving and doing this bakery, and took this business plan to a bank, bought the building, got a small business association loan to cover the financing of the build out for the building and the equipment, and that all happened. We opened over 3.5 years ago in August 1st of 2014. So that was a long answer, sorry.
No. This is an audience that actually cares about this stuff. That's why I'm so happy to talk with you. I mean, you had a huge transition. And I mean, you said we made a commitment. We made a commitment to do this. So at some point, you went out, you raised some money. There's no turning back. You're going to do this. I'm curious, in your head, having had you were the man for some portion of your career in entertainment, and now you're the man in a bakery. It's sort of like maybe a different type of the man. Mm-hmm. But you had. Well, I'm projecting here. Do you feel like? Did you have to let go or, sort of grieve any losses to make this transition?
Yes.
Like, what did you have to go through to make the commitment to say, yep, I'm going in a new direction, I'm never turning back? Or maybe never turning back isn't the right word. But.
Well, I didn't know that I was never turning back right away. I think, as I said in the beginning, I thought, well, I'm going to go right back to work, and I've got to get a job at a studio or network or whatever, because that's who I am, that's what I do. But the more I was getting, even before we opened the bakery, I was getting much more satisfaction out of doing something with my hands and trying to build something for myself. I had no idea if it was going to work or not. And, honestly, the feedback I was getting from a lot of people that had businesses in Los Alamos, people I knew that were successful entrepreneurs that lived in the valley, that, a couple of guys I know that actually built a career in the bakery supplies business, and they were sort of garagiste bakers, 2 brothers I know. They said to me, "You're crazy. You sure you want to do this? I'm not sure you can succeed at this. Do you think there'll be enough people that will come through that will buy your bread? Can you be open enough days and sell enough and do enough?" And, so I was at an intersection with my desire and my enthusiasm and my plans crossing with other people that thought I was crazy. But I had a failure is not an option mindset about what I was doing, and I really believed I could make something like this work. Otherwise, I wouldn't have, bought the farm and, risked everything for it.
Right. We're listening to the song Black Sheep by the New York City twang noir, generally hard to categorize band Big Lazy. This song is off their album Don't Cross Myrtle. I like that title and I like their sound. If you act real quick, you can help Big Lazy make their next album. They've got a Kickstarter campaign running right now. Just swing by makemoveswithjohn.com, find the blog post for this episode, and I'll give you a link. Was there a single moment where you just knew? I mean, it sounds like you got a catering job, and you got to prepare some bread, and you scaled up from, I don't know, a few loaves in your backyard to 800, for 800 people. But was there a moment where you just said, "Oh my God, I love this, and I know it, and I can't hide it from myself anymore"?
It was during that particular time because, I was also. It was that early sense of everybody who had the bread was really enamored by it. And so I was getting a lot of really strong compliments. And that was gratifying in a way that it wasn't as gratifying in the entertainment business because, the best you'll get is a pat on the back from your boss or a bonus, or occasionally someone will tell you did a good job. But it just wasn't that, my experience wasn't quite that way. And I was doing something that I felt I was creating something, and I just really had to do more of it because I knew that the artisan bread movement wasn't saturated enough that there was still room for me to, make something out of it. But it was also through this business model and the business plan that I did, and the fellow that I worked with on it, that we determined that just having a bakery that relied on selling bread or pastry to people wasn't quite enough to make a sustainable model out of. So it the concept had to morph into the bakery and cafe, because someone who's coming in to buy a loaf of bread is going to potentially sit down and have a cup of coffee and a breakfast sandwich or whatever they're going to eat. And this gave me the opportunity to come up with, the concept of what the cafe is all about. Because because I had the time to now curate a menu that is really all about the bread. So a lot of restaurants, it's about the dish and the chef is the star, but the dish is still super important, but the dish has been created to serve the bread. So our breakfast sandwich is on our English muffin, and we're using organic farm eggs and really good cheese and some locally organic greens and a house-made turkey sausage. So it takes your standard Egg McMuffin and it makes it 20 times better because everything is fresh and made in-house. Our corned beef is prepared in-house, and it's put on our New York deli rye that we make, and pickles that we pickle, and potato salad that we make. And so whatever it is that we make is serving a different bread that we may sell in a unique way so that it really creates a total experience. As does creating an outside space that allows people, to sit under big oak trees on picnic tables and bring their food and sit outside and really enjoy life on the Central Coast.
So you came into this bakery business with a really smart business plan, but also a lot of skills from a whole other lifetime. And I'm wondering, those may not be the traditional transferable skills to running a bakery, but did they have any specific advantage?
I'd say the advantage I was able to really leverage, and people do admire us for it, is my marketing background. When you come into the bakery, my wife and I created a space that is unique and inviting, and we came up with concepts for a logo that is able to be a brand. So I was able to take a business, but through the process of launching the business, to create a brand, and that's what people respond to. When they look at our breads on the shelf, every bread has a unique score, and our signature loaf is actually branded with our logo, which our logo was inspired by my great-grandmother's Victorian bread fork, which was used in Victorian times to take a piece of bread off the dinner plate or a dinner roll and put it on your plate. So it's sort of like, not unlike tongs, but it was a fork. And my mother had given it to me when I started baking, and the marketer side of me was looking for something to latch onto, so we could put it on our baseball caps and our sweatshirts, and make tattoos that were temporary tattoos that people could pick up at the register and put on, and Instagram them. And for the first two years, I took every picture of every product myself that I used for promotion. I was writing my own press releases, creating my own ads, doing my own Instagram and all my social media. And it was working great. But after 2 years, I realized that I could hire someone to do that. And I have, and that's been great because it's freed me up to be a bit more visionary about it. But I think, certainly nothing else in my previous life has served me as well as understanding how to market myself. I spent 30 years marketing, TV shows and actors and companies, and now I'm able to use all that experience to market my own business.
You mentioned that now you can hire some people to do things for you, to help out with social media, for example. Now you run a small business, or maybe I don't know how small it is. Let's put it this way: it's not like, is it global? No. So it's not a global business.
I own the global copyright, though. I made sure I did that.
I'll say it probably leans more towards being a sort of like you own it. So it's smaller in that sense. Do you feel like you have to understand every single process in the whole entire place to delegate it or to monitor it, or?
Yes, you absolutely have to understand every single piece of it. Not that you necessarily have to do every piece of it. But in order to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So you know, I may not be back there shaping bread every day, but they know when, you know, when push comes to shove or there's a crisis or there's a need, I'm back there doing that. I'm not as much on the line cooking, but I'm there very often expediting dishes and looking at them to make sure that that's the way the dish was meant to look. That's what the picture we post online looks like. So that's what the dish better look like. And just because there's a line out the door on Sunday afternoon and we're super busy doing hundreds of transactions, each dish still has to look the same, has to have that right level of attention and care. You know, you never know how important the smallest position is in a business until you don't have it or don't have the right person. So whether it's the dishwasher or the prep or the bakers or the barista or the front of house servers, you know, I'm there with eyes all over my head, in back and front and on the sides, keeping an eye on everything.
I mean, you said that everyone thought you were crazy when you decided to try and do, well, not everyone. You said some people.
Most people.
Most people.
Just about everybody.
Yeah, I'm being generous. What made you think that it was possible? I mean, you did the numbers. You had, what'd you say, 114 homework assignments?
Yeah, exactly.
But
as I said, I had a never say fail as part of my soul. I knew that I wanted to do something else, and I found something that I was. Can I tell you a little story? Okay, so I found something that I was passionate and slightly obsessed with. Cut back to now 6 years ago. We were still living in Hancock Park, and around the corner from me, literally, you know, 4 houses over and around the corner, 2 houses down, lived Nancy Silverton, who was the La Brea Bakery founder and is now the owner and founder of Mozza, which is a highly successful chain of restaurants. And about 6 years ago, she had already sold La Brea Bakery and still lived in the neighborhood and had started Café Mozza, big pizza restaurant and salumi, and just, you know, she's a wonderful entrepreneur, successful, very successful restaurateur and chef. Worked for Spago and lots of great restaurants. She lives around the corner, and in the little bookstore in our little village, they were doing a book signing for her for the Mozza cookbook, the first Mozza cookbook to come out. And I said to my wife, well, I'm going to get her to sign the book anyway, and I'm going to buy the book. So I'm going to make her, I just started making bread. So I said, I'm going to make her a loaf of bread and see if she'll try it. And maybe if she tells me it's good, maybe I'll know that I'm on the right path. So I go down to the bookstore, and, you know, there's a line of people, and I buy the book and I wait in line, and I get up to her sitting at the table, and, you know, she says, what do you want it made out to? I said, Bob and Jane, but, you know, just before you sign it, I live around the corner from you, and I'm in a midlife career change. And, you know, if you would just, you know, I made you a loaf of bread. I'm making bread in my backyard. And as I said that, I don't know if your viewers can see this, but if you could picture eyes rolling back in her head so far, like, oy, another one of those. And I said, and I had it, and I, you know, the way I still package the bread is we wrap it in brown craft bags with a little window, and it comes with twine, and I used to stick a sprig of rosemary in it. But I lifted up this presentation. I said, would you give it a try? And she goes, you know, it takes a lot of balls to make me a loaf of bread. So I said, yeah, I know, but I live around the corner, and I'm trying to see if this is, you know, something that I could really do. And I love it. I do it every day. And she goes, well, all right, so tell me about your starter and your fermentation. You know, started asking me questions about my process to see if I had some credibility to me. And so we're having this conversation, but now the line's still getting longer, and I can sense there's impatience growing behind me. So I said, look, it's wrapped up. Here's my card's right on there. It's got my email address and my phone number. Just, if you can, just let me know what you think of it. All right? So I leave, and I get back home, and the next day, I get an email from this fellow named Michael Krikorian, who was actually a writer for LA Times. I knew from living in LA, but I didn't know him. And he writes, Dear Bob, my name is Michael Krikorian. I'm Nancy Silverton's boyfriend, and I'm writing to you because she doesn't do email. Or she didn't at the time. I believe she does now. Or she does now because we've actually corresponded. But he writes, so Nancy comes home from the book signing on Larchmont and says, Michael, look what this guy, made me today. And she opens it up out of the bag and she says, it's actually a nice looking loaf of bread. And then he said, so she cuts it open and she looks at the crust and the crumb and she goes, actually, this is a pretty textbook perfect loaf of bread. And he said, we proceeded to eat 3/4 of that loaf of bread last night. It was so good. And we only saved a small piece for this morning because we had to go out to the market and get some really good butter because it needed good butter. So he said, the only advice Nancy has is that she never set out to make the $1 million baguette. She was only out there to make a baguette that she loved. So, if you're obsessed and you're passionate, follow that passion and hopefully your success will come. Not because you're looking to, be this mega successful thing out of it, but because you found something you like. So I follow that passion and I open the bakery and we do all these things. And about 6 months ago, I got a call from the chef at Bacara, who I know because we actually did quite a bit of bread for them. It was one of our accounts. And he used to come and pick up the bread, though. He lived in Solvang, and he was French, and he would come, and he loved the bakery, and he would have a croissant and pick up 15 or 20 loaves of bread and drive down to Bacara. But he called me and said, I have a request. It's the Julia Child Festival this weekend. And you probably, if your viewers don't know what it is, you may be able to give them more information. But it's a big festival that celebrates everything Julia Child. Santa Barbara was her adopted home city. They sell tickets through the hotel. You come and you stay at the hotel for the weekend. You go to all these different food and wine-centric events that all benefit the Julia Child Foundation. And he said, Nancy Silverton is the celebrity chef for the opening night reception. And she's asked for she's making a specific dish. She's asked for the best bread in the valley or in Santa Barbara County. And she said, I've heard of this little bakery in Los Alamos. So he said, would you do the bread? And I said, yes, I'll do the bread, but you have to invite me to the event. So he invites me to the event and I get there. And again, here she is with a line of people around her and I wait for my turn again. And I extend my hand and I say, hi, Nancy, my name is Bob. And I was your baker. I baked the bread for tonight. And she goes, oh my God, that's so nice to meet you. I've heard so much about your bread and it's obviously delicious. And she made some, wonderful things with it. And I said, well, actually, I need to reintroduce myself to you because about 6 years ago on Larchmont in Hancock Park, I baked you a loaf of bread at a book signing. And she goes, not the guy with the bread wrapped up in the brown bag with the twine and the rosemary. And I said, yes, that was me. And we had this wonderful embrace of a moment where she helped to influence something that I actually followed through on. And Michael Krikorian, they're still together, and she called him over and he came over. He remembered, writing to me and everything. But it really brought it full. You don't always have those things where it comes full circle that way, where someone that influenced a change in direction for your life, and you actually get to have them see how it really did impact your life.
Listeners, I've got the biggest smile on my face. This makes me so happy. That's a great story. I have listed all these. How did you know when? How did you know when you got it right? And that sounds like one of those moments of the universe sent you a signal. That's a fantastic story. This is a little bit of a change of directions, but I'm wondering, you know, between previous life and current life, have your relationships changed in any significant way, or some discernible or palpable way?
Oh yeah, definitely in palpable ways. I mean, first of all, my life was very different. I was, wearing designer suits, and it was all about, Hollywood is much different. You're making impressions in different ways, and I had closets full of shoes and ties and shirts and suits and all these things that I don't have any use for anymore, and I kept them for a long time. And only got rid of them last year when we moved to a different house up here in the valley. Just because I was holding on to a part of the old me, I think. Our relationships became, it's funny when we lived in LA, and a lot of your relationships become either work friends that you socialize with out of work, or you become friends with the parents of your kids' friends, as happens in life. But we moved away, so a lot of those relationships did change. We moved to a community that we'd already had a home, so we knew a lot of people up here in the valley. So that was okay. But it's hard as you get older to make new old friends.
I'm learning that.
Yeah. But at the same time, we've done some of that, and we've also made friends through the bakery business. When you're feeding something, it's a very intimate relationship you have with them, because they're choosing to come and spend their afternoon or their morning with you at your establishment, because you've created someplace that allows them to, spend an hour or two and enjoy a meal and, food and wine or whatever it is. So, we've made some great relationships through the bakery, and then we've made some great relationships just being part of this, artisanal community of winemakers and farmers and people that do things that are very similar to what we do, which is very gratifying.
You found your people, sort of, or a different set of your new people?
Yeah, we found a different set of, as I said, you don't make new old friends, but you find people that you have a lot of things in common with and who appreciate what you do, and it's good. It's a good life.
I'm kind of getting close to the culmination, the end of my questions. We'll get to some easier stuff, but I'm wondering, this big transition, it seems to have gone well. Do you feel like the transition's over from your previous life to this life, or do you feel like you're firmly in this new life now, and there's a next thing after this part?
I don't really know the answer, because I don't have a strategic plan that's that structured. I know that there's more we can do with this brand that we've built. We get property developers from everywhere, from Paso Robles to Atascadero to San Luis Obispo, everywhere in the San Ynez Valley, to Santa Barbara, Montecito, Ventura, Ojai. Property developers come in, they show me these prospectuses of these buildings they're building and spaces they have, and they'd all like to have Bob's Well-Bred in there. And if I were a person starting out this part of my career earlier in my career, I might think about how big does this thing go. I still think how big does this thing go, but maybe in a bit more of a limited way. Is there another location we could be in that could serve the people that really like what we do, but sometimes the drive to Los Alamos is just too much. So I'm thinking about that. Wholesale isn't our favorite thing to do, so I get, emails and calls from people all the time, like, where can I find your bread in Santa Barbara? Where can I find your bread in LA? Where else is it sold? And it's like, you got to come to us. We ship. I do ship. I have a pretty robust shipping program that is off of our website, but I don't do a lot of wholesale just because I don't need to. People come up to us and they buy it and they enjoy it and they tell other people and they come up and buy it too.
I was going to ask you what is the best way to experience Bob's Well-Bred Bakery, but it sounds like you just answered that. Come in.
Come in. It's best fresh. It's best, getting it, the day that we make it. But our breads have remarkable staying power based on how we make them. It's not just saying that we're making bread in an old world style, handmade in small batches, isn't just a marketing hook. The fact is, it's the way that bread used to be made. But the whole industrialization of the bread industry, like many industries, meant that yeast was added so that the bread would ferment faster so that you could make bread faster. Sugar was added so that the yeast would activate faster so that you could make them. There was a lot of shortcuts that came into play, and it's the Wonder Bread concept of how bread is made quickly. There's a video online, you can watch the Wonder Bread factory, and I think from mixing to baking to having it out of the oven is might be about an hour. But our bread takes 36 hours from mixing the starter to mixing the bread to letting the bread ferment and giving it its folds so that you build strength in the dough, to pre-shaping it, to final shaping it. And then it rests in a cool environment for 15 hours before we bake it. So the breads that we're going to have coming out of the oven tomorrow morning, we started on, that's Thursday morning, we start on Tuesday afternoon. So it's about 36 hours from beginning to end. And that high hydration, long fermentation, quality of ingredients, simplicity of ingredients makes a bread that will last 5 or 6 days. Some breads you go into the supermarket and you can squeeze them and you can say, yeah, that bread will be there for a couple of weeks because it's got so many preservatives and additives and extenders. Yeah. If you look at a loaf of bread in the store and you look at the list of ingredients, if it's more than flour, water, and salt, you got to make your own choice. But I would say that's not a bread that you're going to ultimately enjoy.
Do you have a sort of a teacher's pet or a favorite bread or product that you make?
I would say our signature loaf, which is the pain au levain, which was the tartine country bread, which was the first bread I ever made. It's probably our biggest seller. We make the most of them, so we sell the most of them. A lot of our other breads were hybrids off of that, where we've mixed in olives or walnuts or raisins or rosemary and olive oil or different things. And then we come up with other bread formulas as well. But I'd say that's probably our signature item.
So if listeners are out there and they want to learn more about Bob's Well-Bred Bakery and Café, or you in general, where should they go look? I'll provide links and show notes.
They should go to our website, bobswellbred.com. they can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter if they're interested in seeing what, we post a lot of pictures during the week of our specials or, inspirational pictures of different things that we do. Certain, some of our meals, some of our breads, some of our pastry items, just to stay top of mind of people throughout the week. We've realized that we're for the first 3.5 years, we've always been closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays so that, I could regroup and we could do some admin work. But really it's because in the beginning, it was because we only had enough skilled labor to be open that many days. And so over the course of time, we've developed some more people and trained some more people. We're going to be going to 7 days a week on April 1st, because I think we have the capacity to do that. As I sit there doing in the bakery on a day off and just watch the people, that car after car, that they say, oh my God, I drove from Santa Barbara, I drove from LA, we drove from Paso. Why aren't you open? Do you have anything you can sell me? All these things. It's like, look, the shelves are bare. There's nothing here. It's our day off, and we're, either we're prepping or we're just here working, but I have nothing. So we're trying to meet the demand by figuring out if 7 days a week is a good model for us.
Well, I'll provide links for everyone to get to your website if they can intuitively find it. I want to thank you for your time. I want to close with one final question. Why is your pretzel so damn good?
It's like everything we do. We make it the way it's meant to be made. It's meant to be, pretzels are dipped in lye, food grade lye, which gives them that golden brown color. We use a little sea salt on the top, so they got a little saltiness to them. And then, it's the quality, again, it's the quality of ingredients. It's the beauty of our ovens that we use. Maybe you've been eating too many pretzels at the mall, growing up, but that's the way a real Bavarian pretzel should be.
Well, I'm going to have to go out and visit, not on a day when you're closed or after you're open.
Pretzels are on weekends only, so don't.
Thank you for your time. I hope to keep in touch.
Thank you for having me, John. Pleasure
thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much for sharing all this beautiful information with listeners out there.
Great.
Thank you.
Of course.
All right, there you have it. This episode is coming to a close. Big thanks to Bob for coming on the show. If you're ever in Central California's wine country, swing through Los Alamos and find Bob's Well-Bred Bakery and Café. It is worth the trip alone. It is that good. Also, big thanks to Big Lazy for letting us feature some of their music in our episode. If you want to go by makemoveswithjohn.com and find the blog post for this episode, you will be able to find a Kickstarter link so you can help them make their next album. New episodes coming out soon. Until then, I hope you will all take good care of yourselves. Go out there and make moves.